Hi there. Today, my guest is Fred Horch, who is a neighbor in Brunswick. But Fred has a long history of sustainability um, actions, I guess is a good word. So, Fred, how are you today? Thank you so much for being here.
Well, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. This is
Cool.
really fun.
Yeah. So Fred, I first heard of Fred. I don't even know how long ago it was when you had your store, but so Fred had a sustainability-ish store downtown Brunswick, and how long ago was that?
Right. Yeah, that's going back a ways. So it's now 2023. So this was gosh, more than a decade ago. I think it was 2006 maybe when we opened, somewhere in that time
Wow.
frame. Yeah, so it's been a while, and I had the store for about 4 years, and then we sold it, and it was there for another couple of years under a different name. And yeah, so it's been a while, but it was a really fun experience for me. You know, never in a million years thought I would have a retail store in a small town on the coast of Maine when I was growing up, but I loved it.
That's really cool. And I think you have probably the perfect personality to go to meet community people, and just, chat them up and have them come back because you know so much and you're just so personable. I know that's a big seller for me. Like if when you go to the store and someone is just you can tell that they hate their job. You're
Right.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No,
you're
I
not
loved
that
it.
person.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love people. I love talking to people. My wife always teases me, like, when we were dating, like I was supposed to meet her somewhere, and I'd be walking along, and I just run into a perfect stranger, and I start talking to them, and then I'd be late for our date. So I find people just fascinating. I've lived all over the world, and I just, especially people who are very different from me, and think about things differently. I'm just really attracted to them. So I talk a lot. I talk to a lot of different people. Um, and yeah, it was just a great fit. For the only thing that didn't fit was I had a young family. I had three kids, and so we ended up selling the store so that we could go on sabbatical to Japan for a year. And that, I would say, family is more important than business for me. So, but it was close. There were a few times where I felt like I was putting the business ahead of my kids. So, but in the end, the kids won, and so I don't have the store anymore. But it was really fun while it lasted.
That must have been I mean, I'm sure it wasn't really hard to choose, like in your head, like choose
Right.
family and traveling and adventure over, the store. But at the same time, like you've invested so much in the store. So was that like a tricky thing in your head? Because you were saying also that your business partners were not really interested in doing it without you.
Right. Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, the store was really, so it was named FW Horch, which is, my last name, and it really, I was there a lot, and it really became obvious after a couple of years that I really need to be part of, there. It was really sort of a reflection of me. Like my presence in downtown in Maine, is kind of what made that store work. And I had great employees. I had a really great staff. But when you walk into a small store like that, you kind of want to talk to the owner, and I just got a lot out of it. But my partners, didn't well, they actually, they both did work on the store a little bit, but they were more interested in other things. They were there to help me and help the store grow. I needed to bounce ideas off. It's really hard when you have a business and you're the only person. I admire people who can do that. I can't do that. So every business I've had, I've always brought in people and tried to, like, get other people involved. So that's what was happening with that store. I had two partners, and then when I'm like, well, I want to go to Japan for a year, it's like, nah, we really can't run the store without you, Fred. So if you want to keep the store going, you should sell it. So that's what we did. We found a couple buyers. We chose one of them and sold the store. We took the name though because I just didn't feel right. It was called FW Horch, and there was no Horch in the store, so it changed it. It was called Shift, I think, is what they called the store after they bought it. But it had everything. It had all the same products and everything, but just didn't. It's hard to keep a store like that going if you don't really love it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and I think, again, it was sustainable in an economic sense for me, and I think it was sustainable for them. But I just think the time commitment is just really, it's really tough to have a
Yeah.
small business like that.
And what items did you sell in the store? I know we were talking about compost
Yeah,
and
right. Yeah. So the name of the store was FW Horch Sustainable Goods and Supplies. And it actually, the first thing I did is I actually bought shares in a store called the Green Store. So I became an owner of the store. And actually, at the time that I bought into that business, the Green Store had a solar division, which became Revision Energy, which is the largest solar installer like in New England now. So Revision's very successful, but it started as part of the Green Store. And then the Green Store is in Belfast, and they had another location in Damerscott.
mm,
And when I somehow got to know the owners of that, I think there was like 4 or 5 of us who were shareholders in that company. And I pitched them an idea of opening up a location in Brunswick that I would run. So that's what we did. We opened up a branch of the Green Store in Brunswick. It was on Pleasant Street in the church at 4 Pleasant Street. And I think you'd find it in Vessel now. But we opened that store, and so it was like almost like a franchise, right? It was the Green Store, been around for a long time. I love the concept, but the part of it that I didn't really understand and appreciate was how much of that store was sort of health related. One of the Ellie Daniels, who owned the store, that was the manager up in Belfast. She's a midwife, and there was a lot of supplements, and there was a lot of stuff about personal health. And I'll tell you, I got very uncomfortable. I'd have people that had seasonal affective disorder, which is
mm-hmm.
they're depressed basically, and they're suicidal. And we would sell this light therapy sort of thing, and people would come in asking about all sorts of supplements, about all their health ailments. And I was like, I just really do not want to do that part of the business. But we also had this solar installation business, which I was excited about, and we sold kits and parts for people who were living off grid. And then we had a little bit of stuff about organic gardening. We had clothing. We had every building supplies. We had the Green Store is like, they called it a general store for the 21st century.
I love it.
But it was too much. And so I'm like, you know what I want to do? I want to focus on what I call the hard goods, the stuff that like if I point to something in the store, this is going to help save the planet. And we sort of had this meeting, and I was like, I want to take the Brunswick store. I want to get rid of all the soft, fluffy stuff that I don't, and stuff that's making me nervous. And I want to focus just on the hardcore, the hard goods,
Yeah.
the sustainability in terms of environmental, protecting the planet sort of stuff. And I'm like, you know what? That's not the Green Store. The Green Store has all these different parts. And it turns out selling supplements is very profitable, which is true. I mean, but I was like, I
Yes.
just don't want to do it. So I basically sold my shares back in the Green Store, and took all the products basically and closed down the Green Store, and then moved onto Main Street and reopened as FW Horch Sustainable Goods and Supplies, and sold most of what the Green Store, I mean, there's a huge amount of overlap that first year, and then really focused on what turned out to be like composting turned out to be my biggest thing. But we ended up getting a paint mixture. We had paints in there. We had marmoleum flooring. I did help a lot of people with their off-grid solar stuff.
Cool.
And yeah, so it just really is like our tagline was practically saving the planet, right? So practically saving the planet. So what are practical ways you could save the planet? And I'm actually looking at a sign from the store right above my computer here. So
Awesome.
I took that with me when we closed the store down.
That's awesome. And I think that it says a lot about you, Fred, that you like to go into a venture with partners, with people to bounce ideas off of. Because if you were going into a business and you were like, this is mine, this is exactly how it's going to be, it may not be what everyone needs. And so to have other people to say, oh, well, what about this? And you're open enough to that, that I think it probably is why you were so successful. Because I think, and I kind of get, how you would be uncomfortable with certain things, the supplements and whatever. Like, you need to make it yours.
Right.
I have a problem with sales if it's not something that I know a lot about, or if it's something that I don't really believe in.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I
I
can't
think
sell
that's
something that I
right,
wouldn't put my own
right.
money into.
Yeah, and I hope that goes for anybody. I mean, if you have a store or business, really, I mean, if you don't believe in the product, don't do it. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I'm sorry I can't help you with that because I don't know enough about it to really help you. So I'm really not going to carry it.
right,
Because
yeah,
then you'd have to hire someone who does know something about it. And is that going to take away from,
right,
just
yeah,
focus on what you know and what you know
yeah,
you need
right.
for
I will
sure.
say I ended up hiring Brett Thompson, who was just fantastic, and he was our worm guy. So I don't know if you remember when we used to sell worm bins in the store,
I
and
don't remember that, but that I was not
okay,
into that at that
yeah.
point.
So we we he had this in Bodenham, he had this gigantic bin of worms. So it's like, as big as my office here, full of like these red
Wow.
wiggler worms. So he knew a lot more about that than I did. I know a little bit about composting, but so I do think it's great if you're interested in something, do hire somebody who knows more than you, because Brett knew a lot more than I did. And he was just hilarious. He was just such a great employee, and a good friend. And we'd go up to Common Ground Fair. We take the store up there once a year for the Common Ground Fair. And Fridays is when they'd have the students come by. It was like student day, and we'd have our worm bin set up. And man, it was like a show because Brett was
Wow.
there talking about the worms. All the kids could, and the boys would throw the worms at the girls, and the
Oh my
girls, the guy,
gosh.
like all the tomboys would come.
Girls are
And
screaming and
it was just so much fun. And then people would take we had these little Chinese takeout containers that we would put the worms in, and people would take them home, and we'd give them bins and tell them how to do it. And I was just mentioning it before we started recording, but I was playing pickleball the other day, and somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, are you Fred? I have one of your worm bins." Or I think he had his worm bin and he gave it to a friend. But it's like, man, even this much time later, people are still using those products, still remember me. It's just fun. I you know it just really, talk about sustainability. It's just to feel good about all the products we sold. And that was, for me, it was a really great move to get out of things that I didn't feel good about into things that I felt really good about, and I just
yeah.
wish everybody had one. So it became super easy to talk about them and to sell it, and to just it just made, even if I wasn't making any money, um it was fine. So every day I would always say, like, I never knew it was going to happen that day. Like, it could be. And the other thing I'll say is, like, the very first year that we opened up, maybe a year and a half, I'd get a lot of people coming in there just to yank my chain. They'd be like, this is not sustainable, that's not sustainable. They would be pointing to all the things in the store and telling me how crazy it was about all this stuff, and I loved it.
Right?
Like, people came in there trying to make me angry or defensive or whatever, and I'd be like, really, why do you think that? And I am, again, I love to argue. I was a lawyer before I did all this, and so I would just like, well, what about this, what about that? And it just became not fun for them. I mean, there's all these cranks out there who think they know so much, and I'm like, well, great, tell me what you know. And especially the folks who are there's a lot of people who have this like idea of how things work. And when you start to talk to somebody who really understands it, you realize you don't really know. Like, I was just writing about batteries, and I thought I kind of knew how recharging worked, but I didn't really know how it worked. So like, I love being in conversation with a person, or with, a book or something, where you like, it's very easy to think you know about something, and then
Mm.
when you get challenged on some of your fundamental assumptions, you realize, wow, that's a little bit more complicated. I don't fully understand it. So anyway, it was fun. And then I felt like I was onto something when I got very, very few of those people coming in, because I guess the word got out, like, you're not going to have any fun. You're not going to, it's just not going to be worth it. He'll just convince you, or whatever. Like, so, again, I
He's
still have
not
those
going to get wound up. It's no fun.
well, I get wound up, but I'm not going to, like, you're not going to show me that I'm wrong. You might tell me something that I already know, but you probably won't tell me anything I don't know about any of the products in my store. And at first, people came in, and I get that, like, about electric cars and all sorts of things. People tell me things that are true, and thinking like electric cars. A lot of people are saying, well, didn't you know there's all this stuff in the batteries with electric cars? I'm like, yes, I do know what's in the batteries. I do know all the different chemicals. I know what chemicals are in this particular car. And I know, all the stuff. So it's just, I find that very interesting. And I like the argument part as well as the knowledge part. And I think some people like just the argument part. They just want to prove that they're smarter than you or prove that you're wrong about something and don't really care about getting to a shared truth. I love to argue, but usually what I'm trying to do is get to a shared truth. But some people don't like to argue. So like, I get that too. Like some people, don't like that kind of,
The
I always think it's like,
confrontation. Yeah.
yeah, the confrontation. I like that part. I like to argue. I did debate when I was in high school, but I also like to have a debate where it's not just about things that, like if you can debate about a religion, but what's the point? Because, like there's no truth there. But if you argue about electric cars, about the minerals in the batteries and whether it's a good or bad idea, to me, I think there is truth there. Like at some level you can decide, should I have an electric car? Should I have a gas powered car? Should I have no car? And you can have a discussion that helps you really figure out, well, what decision do I want to make? What's right for me in my life?
Okay.
So,
Well, so on the car subject, then I know
yeah,
there's talk right now, and I don't know anything. I don't have any opinion, but so there's clearly there's gas. There's also electric, and now there's talk of hydrogen. Is that? And I feel like I've just read that
yep,
there was another option as well, and I
yeah.
don't.
There's lots of options. So our buses in Portland are running on compressed natural gas. Yeah, that's what it is, compressed, not liquefied, right? Compressed natural gas, which is great. So there's a lot of different ways to operate a vehicle, but basically there's two main options you have. One is to burn fuel. So you'd
Mm,
have we would call that an engine. And then one is to use a battery of some sort. And I would put a fuel cell in that battery camp, and then you'd use an electric motor. So you can have a chemical reaction that's creating electricity and using that electricity to spin a motor. That would be an electric car. So you'd probably put a fuel cell in the electric car camp, because what a fuel cell is doing is it's taking hydrogen and having that go through a chemical reaction, creating a charge, and then actually that charge is propelling an electric motor.
mm,
So that's actually a very efficient process. You could have a hydrogen powered car that actually burns hydrogen in a piston sort of thing, like you do with a gas powered car. And what that's doing is producing heat, which expands a fluid, which turns a crankshaft. And then you have to exhaust the exhaust and then do that, combustion again. So those kind of cars are called internal combustion cars. And there's a lot of different fuels you could burn in a combustion engine. You could burn gasoline, diesel, you can burn natural gas, which is methane, or you could burn hydrogen. You could even burn wood if you could figure out how to really make that happen, coal. But in general, what we're seeing with vehicles is people are not burning things anymore, because that's about 30% efficient all told. So most of the energy in the fuel you're wasting in terms of heat,
mm-hmm.
and you're also producing pollution in almost all cases. If you burn hydrogen, the emissions are water, so that's good. But if you burn natural gas or gasoline or diesel, the emissions are water and carbon dioxide. And the water is not a problem, because the water comes out your tailpipe, goes into the ground, goes into the ocean. It becomes part of the water cycle. It's not really changing
Right.
the chemistry of our planet in any way. But carbon dioxide comes out, it disperses into the atmosphere, it goes into the water, and it does change the chemistry. And that's driving what people are calling climate change. So
Mm.
you're having, chemical reaction in your car when you burn the fuel, and then you end up with a lot of this pollution. So anyway, that vehicles are really an interesting thing right now, because we are in this major transition. In the 1800s, when they first invented vehicles, and actually one of my namesakes, so there was a guy named Augustus Horch who created a company called Audi. So Audi is Horch for listen, which is Audi is Latin for Horch, which means hark or listen. So Audi and Horch mean the same thing. And this guy, Augustus Horch, invented these cars. But back when he was inventing cars, in the 1800s, there was a big question about whether they should be electric or gas burning. And then we decided we should burn gas. So we did that for the 1900s. And now in the 2000s, we're back to, hey, should they be gas or electric? And now it's like we're deciding, hey, maybe electrics are better. So I'm firmly in the electric car camp, and I could talk for hours about that. I've driven electric cars since we got back from Japan. Actually, we sold our car, went to Japan, had no car in Japan, came back. I bicycled over to a dealer, the Nissan dealer in town, and said, hey, I want to buy a Leaf. So we had one of the first electric Leaf cars in Maine, and figured out how that worked, and we've been driving electric ever since.
That's awesome. And so oh gosh, there's so much in your world that that we could talk about. I know you you were telling me that you are a master gardener volunteer, which is super cool, and I definitely want to talk about that. And you, with starting in the store, I would assume, or maybe even sooner, that you were talking about compost a lot. And so you know a lot about compost. But you said also that you go to the Common Ground Fair and you volunteer in the compost.
Right. Yeah.
The compost, is it a tent? No, it's not a tent.
There is a
The
tent.
compost...
Yep, it is a big tent. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the tables under the tent, all the compostable stuff goes to that tent, and then we sort it there, and we put stuff where it needs to go. It's a lot of fun. You get a special T-shirt if you volunteer for the composting duty at Common Ground Fair. But yeah, I think one of the things you were saying is you'd be interested in sort of how I got to where I am. So maybe I'll go back to, I grew up in Utah. I think that might have played a role in sort of my kind of passion for the environment, and especially I grew up in Salt Lake City, and I grew up in the foothills there. And from my house, I could hike up to the mountains and hike over a ridge, and I'd be like out of the city. I'd be like in wilderness. And like really, if you I grew up in the 70s in the Utah, like if you get out of Salt Lake City, it was like urban, and then it was like remote. Like I was in the Boy Scouts, and we'd do this wilderness. We went for a week and lived sort of like you had to like look for food and make your own water, all that sort of stuff. It was great. Up to the high Uintas and the wilderness there, no roads, So I really, for me, it was like there's a very clear distinction between the environment and, like so the built environment, humans, houses, everything. I mean, very modern, living in Salt Lake City, and then walk just up and over this hill, and then you're like in nature. And I'd find like Indian arrowheads, and you'd have seen, cougars and deer, and just like, like you felt, so I felt like I could go between those two worlds very easily, and love kind of both of them. I really was into computers and all that sort of stuff, but also like to go out, like to go skiing and hiking and all that sort of stuff. But in this valley, you could kind of see it filling up. You could see like there's a certain amount of valley, and when I was growing up, the houses stopped, and you could see, and then they kept, every year they sort of grow, and it's like you could kind of see this like almost like this petri dish filling up. And then what are you going to do then? What's going to happen when this valley is full?
Yeah.
And then extending that to the earth is like, okay, we're on this planet, and there's only one planet, and there's nowhere else to go. So I don't know, that just sort of is with me, just I think having that strong connection. I went to college in near Philadelphia, and it's not the same when I'm on the East Coast. You don't, like, if you're inside a big urban setting, it's hard to get to what I consider like nature, like it's just, you have to go a long way in any direction. And it's just not like that out west. So I think that sort of played a formative role in sort of why the environment was so important for me. But again, I also had this very strong interest in technical stuff, like how stuff works was really, I was always just, I love computers. And then I went to Swarthmore College. I intended to be an engineer. But when I got there, I just became fascinated by politics and law. Like I just didn't know how our system worked. I didn't know how our political system worked. I didn't know how our legal system worked. And Swarthmore's a liberal arts college, and Dukakis was running for president, and he's a Swarthmore grad, so he came through the whole presidential campaign. Came through. It's like stuff I'd never even thought about. Never. It's like, wow, this is so interesting. Like, so then I just really changed gears. I studied computer science mainly. Most of my time at Swarthmore was spent doing computer science, but I really got interested in Russia, and I went to live in the Soviet Union. I studied Russian. And I became actually majored in political science, and ended up going to law school at Berkeley. And then I had a career as a lawyer, and made some money. And so then I had some money, and I felt like I had a pretty good sense of how politics and law worked, having spent some time as a lawyer. And I thought, okay, that's not for me. I don't want to do politics. I don't do law anymore. I want to save the planet. So my wife got a job at Bowdoin College. We moved to Maine. And ever since then, it's been like, okay, how can I save the planet? How can I take what I know, what I'm interested in, what isn't being done that could be done? And yeah, so I had the opportunity to, I didn't have to be a lawyer anymore. And I worked for Maine Interfaith Power and Light, which was rolling out a green electricity offer throughout Maine. So I got to travel all over Maine. And then I think that's probably where I connected to the Green Store people. And then since then, I've been really focused on, I'm calling myself a sustainability coach now. It's like, how do I help people understand how to be sustainable and then do a better job? That's kind of what I want to do. But a few years ago now, I guess 2014 maybe, a friend called me up, and we started a company called Spark. And so Spark Applied Efficiency, and we're a mechanical contractor. We do work for commercial properties, and we help them become more efficient. And we do heat pumps, we do LED lighting, we do solar, we do everything you could think of to operate your business more efficiently.
And so it's catering anyway to businesses.
Right. Yeah. So my partner in that business is named Pat Kuhn, and I knew him from the Green Store days. He and Bill Barron started what became Revision Energy. And so Pat was sort of wrapping up his involvement with Revision and wanted to do something different, called me up sort of out of the blue and just said, hey, I have this idea for a different kind of mechanical contracting company, one that would be really focused on efficiency, on helping businesses use energy better, like less pollution, and just we're both very focused on how to be more efficient. And so like, yeah, let's do it. So we got a couple of clients, and then it's grown. We now have like, I think 12 employees, and we've done a lot of work. We built the gelato fiasco factory in town. We did the Portland Food Co-op. We helped build the Tao greenhouse. So we do really interesting projects. We just today I found out we're going to do a big solar farm down in Biddeford.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's really, really fun stuff. Do a lot of LED lighting retrofits, that kind of stuff. So yeah, and then I think I'm rambling here, but anyway, I'm always doing something.
You've got a lot. There's just a lot.
I'm always like looking at my plate and thinking, gosh, how can I cram more stuff on there? When I was at Swarthmore, you're supposed to take 4 classes every semester, and I could never limit myself to 4. I was squeezing 5 on, and like it was, that's I guess the way I am. I just like if I could do one more thing, like that would be great. Like, oh, I want to do this, but I want to do that too. And so
right, it's too hard to choose, so I'm going to do both.
Right. Yeah.
There's a girl that I volunteer with who's, I guess I think it's a COVID thing where you can get free schooling for a certain amount of time. So she's taking 6 classes, and she's like, wow. I don't sleep anymore. But I think she's only got 1 more week.
Well, there's some people like that. Just the internet is so great. I mean, nowadays, if you're curious and interested to know how things work, what a time to live. I'm still amazed, by all the resources that are available through the internet. It's just incredible. And your podcast being one of them. Like, if you're interested, I think you said the sort of the genesis of this was, I want to be more sustainable. What can I do? I mean, what a great thing. You can talk to people, you can share that, and then the next person along can see what you've learned and learn from it. So I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you want to talk about next? I know I'm just very, very rambly. Hopefully people have a sense of who I am and that I care about this stuff and I think about it, and I thought about it for a very long time. But is there
Great.
anything in particular you wanna talk about? Or I guess we want to talk about maybe about so I own a Spark, but I'm also working on a handbook. Is that something you want to talk about?
Definitely. Yeah. So
Right.
on I Fred blah, Fred, you were saying that you wanted to save the world.
Right.
And
Yep.
so one
Yep.
of the things, even though you have this business that is helping businesses to be more efficient and sustainable, you are
Yeah.
also writing these handbooks for people to
Right.
have
Yeah.
for themselves on their, as well. So please
Right.
tell us about that. I know that there are 3
Sure.
handbooks.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So the idea is basically to share what I know. And the first one was on investing. And that's one of the reasons I mean, the reason I did that is because I've got 3 kids who had summer jobs and had a bunch of money, a couple $1,000s. And I like, you need to invest this. Like, and that's something that comes up in sustainability discussions a lot. A lot of my customers would come into the store and want to do things, but budget's a limiting factor. So I think part of sustainability is money. I mean, and you can't sort of get around it. It's you need money to live in our society. We've if we didn't have money, we'd go back to older ways of living, and we probably couldn't have that many people living in Maine. So we all need money. So anyway, that's the first handbook. And then I've also written a guidebook that really kind of sums up what we've learned at Spark. So that's the second one. But then the third one is a sustainability handbook, and it's really designed to help people understand sort of well, it's a how to be sustainable. And of course, that begs the question: what is sustainable? If you're going to do it, how do you measure it? So it really dives into that question. Like, if you could give yourself a sustainability score, what would it be? What would you measure? How would you measure it? And how are you doing on it? And that's kind of the idea. For me, it's hard. You can do things without measuring them, but if you measure them, you can see if you're doing them well and you can get better. And so that's really, we're trying to with a handbook, I'm really trying to break sustainability down into something that you can actually measure, and you can plan, and you can get better. So for an example, when I bought this house, we had 2 heating systems in it. We had a furnace that burned heating oil and blew air around, hot air,
Mhm.
and they had a boiler, which is a hydronic system, so it burned oil, and then there were pumps that pumped the hot water through the house. It's a big house, way bigger than I would ever imagine owning. But so this was a problem. I bought this house, and I'm a sustainability guy, and it's like, I'm not just burning one burning fossil fuel in 2 heating systems. This is crazy. So I created this sort of plan, this long-term plan. It's like, I don't want to burn any fossil fuel. I don't want to buy fossil fuel, and I want to burn it. That's my goal. And then how do I achieve that goal? So it's easy to measure. Like, am I buying fossil fuel? I can tell, I can measure how much fossil fuel am I burning. And then I can get to my goal, which is burning no fossil fuel. And so I've achieved that. So that's the kind of thing I would like to do with the handbook, is help people set goals, measure them, figure out a pathway to achieve that goal, and then provide all the knowledge that's necessary to get there.
That's really cool. I mean, I was telling you before, like, I think that the measuring thing is really good to, sort of set goals and stuff. And I think that it makes it more effective if you have, you don't have to, you have an end goal in sight, but you're not like, I have to instantly be this. Like,
Yeah,
there is a
right.
process to everything. And unless you're just, I mean, I went to the library for to learn about worm farming and worm composting, and I did not plan to, but I ended up leaving with a worm bin, which
That's
you
awesome.
know something about
That's
from doing
great.
that at the Common Ground Fair. But
Right.
like, so that
That's so
was
much
not my
fun.
plan.
Right.
I instantly had a worm bin.
Uh-huh. That's great.
But that's not typical
Yeah.
for a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
I think
that's
there's room
great.
for that. That serendipity is great. But like, I remember reading an article way back when about a town just trying to figure out what to do about their landfill. And that actually became an issue here in Brunswick because we used to have a landfill. It was filling up, and we tried to extend the life of the landfill as long as we could, because now what we do is we put our garbage on a truck and we drive it up to, was it June?
Oh, West Bath.
West Bath. Well, that's the transfer station. I don't know where it actually gets dumped in the ground now. But anyway, think about it. Who wants to be driving behind all these trucks full of garbage, right? So composting, it turns out, is a great way. Like, I think 40% of the stuff that gets buried in a landfill, you could compost in your backyard, turn into a great soil amendment, and not have to put it on a truck anywhere. So you could take 40% of the trucks off the road, save all that hassle and fuel and expense. So to me, it was like, wow, that's great. How do I compost? I didn't really know about composting. I didn't do it as a kid. And I really got into it. And so that's the kind of thing the handbook's about, is like, well, if you want to compost, well, what is it and how do you do it? And why? So composting is great for a lot of reasons. But it's, it can take a little bit of work to do. I get a lot of questions about stinky worm bins and can I compost this? And can I compost that? And should I compost this? And what do I do with the compost once I have it? And why am I not getting so much? Like, I had customers who would come in and buy a composter. They wanted to make compost because they're imagining of all this garbage, right? Of this food garbage, I'm going to have like lots of compost. And after a year, they'd come back so sad. They're like, I put all this food into my composter and I got this little teeny bit of compost out. I'm like, yeah, that's what happens.
Yes.
But it's great if you think about it, not in the sense of I want to make compost, but I want to prevent garbage and I want to save my town money and save landfill room. You've done a great thing. Just think about how much of that garbage never had to be hauled off to a landfill. So
go into a bag and drive who knows where.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's heavy, it's stinky. And then in the landfill, a lot of people don't realize this, but landfills are designed to contain things. And so the food that would compost naturally in your backyard goes into a landfill and it doesn't compost. And it produces methane instead, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. So there's a lot of reasons to compost. And I just love helping people do it. It's just a really fun, practical, hands-on, tangible thing. And every time I do compost, it makes me feel good. I feel like I'm doing something that's good for my community, good for the planet. And I just hope people, that's, I guess, another part of the handbook is how to feel like you're making a difference. What you're doing actually matters, because I think you mentioned this, like sustainability is so broad and so big. And how do I know if this is really sustainable or not? Am I making the right choice or the not right choice? Self-doubt and like, oh, is this even worth it? So I'm really hoping, it's not done yet, but I'm hoping when it is done, it will give people a real sense of accomplishment. Like, okay, I know what I need to do. It kind of maybe helps you center a little bit on, and also take pride in some of the accomplishments, because you were mentioning you're doing a lot of stuff. You're a very sustainable person, but you might not give yourself credit. So I'm hoping that I have this thing called a sustainability score. I'm hoping people will be able to do that, and they'll be able to take pride in what they're already doing, and then see what's left for them to do, and then kind of have a better sense of, okay, what's my next step? I'm here, I want to be there, what do I do next? And not be sort of in this analysis paralysis where it's like you're sort of like, there's so many things I could do, I got to think about all the stuff, I don't know what I'm doing. I get that a lot, especially when people are building houses. People would come into the store and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed by all the choices. So I think my handbook will be very opinionated, is what I believe. But hopefully people can take or leave it and say, well, I might disagree with Fred on that, but at least I understand where he's coming from. These are his priorities. And I also want to have a methodology for people to set their own priorities. Like, if this is important to you, well, then this is what you should be doing. And if it's not important to you, don't worry about it. But if it is important to you, here's the things that you need to be doing that will actually solve this problem.
Okay. So you have, gosh, it's just so much. All right. So if somebody wanted to be more sustainable and they, it is so big, so like you need to start small, would you say composting? Or what would you say in your experience, Fred? Like, if somebody wanted to start, would it be composting, or would it be like changing your light bulbs, or something like that?
Well, I think a great place to start is to do a little survey. So I would, and that's really what with this handbook we're going to do. Or it's going to be an app. I actually have already started to develop that because I love writing software. So we have a little app. So the first thing I would do to anybody is like say, hey, let's take a little survey. And I have 7 pathways that I think I like people to kind of keep in mind. And so one of them is energy. So think about, okay, how are you using energy? Are you burning fossil fuel? Are you being efficient with your energy use? Just things like that. Just think about how you're using energy. And the other thing is food. Like, what about your diet? Are you eating beef? Are you eating meat? Are you a vegetarian? Like, are you eating all the food you buy from the grocery store, or is half of it being thrown away? So think about your diet, your food. Think about water. Like, do you have efficient, toilets and sinks and showers and things? Are you, how's the runoff if you own your own house? Do you have a lot of impervious surfaces? Is water running off? Are you collecting rainwater, that sort of thing? Think about sort of goods. So this would be like recycling. Are you recycling? What kinds of things are you buying? What materials do you buy? Do you buy a lot of plastic? Do you buy things in your shopping bags, your reusable shopping bags? Think about habitat, which is, your yard. Is your yard a place where birds and bees can live? Are you using a lot of pesticides in your yard? Think about community, like how are you connected to your neighbors? Are you volunteering? Are you making the world better for other people? Are you how if you were to be hit by a bus tomorrow, how would people remember you? That sort of thing. And then movement. How do you get around? Are you able to walk in your neighborhood? Do you bicycle? Do you drive your car everywhere? What kind of vehicle do you drive? So those are, I call them 7 pathways to sustainability. So kind of I think it's just kind of get a sense of like all those different things you're doing in your life, all the different things you could be doing, and then pick one that you think, oh, you know what? I was going through this list and all the things I'm doing, this one I think I could work on. So give yourself a lot of options.
So it's like a choose your own adventure for
Exactly, right.
sustainability.
Yeah, because I don't think there's one answer for everybody. You know what I mean? Like it could be that if you go through that list of the 7 pathways and you think, you know what, of all the things I'm doing, I think my diet, like I could cut out beef. Like that would be huge. Like just don't eat beef. Like that one thing there would be enormous. Or if you're thinking about habitat, you think about your yard and you're like, I've been putting on this pesticide on my yard and it's running off and it's causing all the nitrification in the too much nitrogen is getting into the water in the Gulf of Maine, and I don't want to contribute to that anymore. Put less fertilizer on your yard, that sort of thing. So again, I think there's that's what I would suggest. I'd love to have a conversation with a person and figure out what is easy for them, what is an easy next step, what they think would be significant, and then connect them with resources so they can actually be successful doing it. But certainly just off the top of my head, I think avoiding beef is a very easy thing. Just don't buy beef. That's a really easy step. And there's a lot of resources that talk about why beef in particular is a problem. Certainly organic yard care, if you do have a yard, obviously it doesn't apply to everybody, but if you do have a yard, some organic yard care is very easy. A lot of it's like just don't buy the stuff. In the same vein, it would be think about what you're putting down in your sink drain and maybe change some of your cleaning products. That's a very easy thing to do. If you're thinking about your energy use, if you haven't already swapped out to LED light bulbs, those are a great thing. They're available everywhere. And an old-fashioned incandescent light bulb is 60 watts, and an LED light bulb is 10 watts. So, that's 50 watts of savings right there. I mean, if everybody swapped over to LED light bulbs, we could shut down a bunch more coal power plants because there'd be so much less electricity that we need. So I don't know, that gives you a flavor. I just, for me, it's like, it's really being aware of all the things you are doing and all the things you could do differently. And then choosing the ones that have the highest reward ratio. Some things are hard to do And so like, oh, well, electric car, boy, that's gonna be tough for me. So maybe put that on the back burner and try composting. That might be
Mm-hmm.
an easier thing for you. I
Right.
also like things that you do like composting for me is a really great thing because it's a very tangible thing and it's connected to multiple pathways. So it's connected to the food you eat. So if you're cooking and you're not buying, packaged food, then you often will have leftover stuff. Like, what do I do with all my peels? Well, maybe if you compost them, you can compost them, and then you can use that compost in your yard instead of fertilizer. So it kind of hits a lot of different pathways and helps you feel especially virtuous. At least for me, I'm always feeling like if we have a meal prepared from like vegetables or something we bought from the farmer's market, and we have all this extra stuff that's kicking around that we don't put in the garbage, we put in our compost bucket, and then I compost it, and then I use that compost to put on my patch of peas or something, and I grow peas. That to me, I just feel really connected to the earth. I feel really good about what I'm doing. And again, I think that's what I'm looking for, is like something that I'm doing that I can see makes a difference and makes me feel good. Like, I feel about who I am, what I'm doing. And if I have a friend over, I'm not embarrassed. It's like, I'm not embarrassed that I'm composting. I'm happy that I'm composting.
Right.
Maybe I wish I could compost better, but it's like, I would be embarrassed if I put all this stuff in the garbage. That would embarrass me. I'd be like, oh, well, I don't know how to compost it. I haven't thought about it. I haven't done it. Just put it in the garbage.
Mm-hmm.
That would make me feel a little ashamed.
Yeah,
But
I
try
hear
not to be
that.
ashamed, I guess. Try to do things I'm proud of, that I'm proud to tell my kids, this is why we do it. I want you to do this. Set a good example.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think it's important to start, to kind of start small and do something that will show results, and you
Right.
can feel really good about that, and be like, "Oh, okay, this is why we're doing it. It feels really good.
Yeah.
What
Right.
else can I do?"
Yeah.
So
Right.
something that will like gain some momentum.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm looking forward to that app. That's really fun.
Cool. Yeah.
That
Well, I'll put you on the list. I have a few beta testers. It's very, very rough right now. But the first thing we do is we give you a survey. You can do a sustainability survey. And I think just even doing that is like fun, because you're like, oh, I didn't think about that. Why am I doing that? I could be doing this. So
right.
so even before you like do anything else, just taking that survey, I think. So I guess that's my answer. If there's one thing you could do, it would be take a sustainability survey and then think about your answers.
Yeah. Sort of like a how, what do they call it? The audit, efficiency
Yeah,
audit,
right,
kind
right.
of like art,
Yeah,
but it's for
yeah,
you.
right, exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. So this is, my goodness, this is just so much information. It's very cool. But so you have these handbooks, they are available. You would
Yep,
subscribe to them, right? I just put
right.
my email in.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
horchhandbook.com, I think it's the website. So it's not the greatest website, but I have written the investing handbook, the efficiency guidebook is there, and then the sustainability handbook is coming. All I have is a mailing list right now, but I also have started writing these little articles. So as I'm writing the handbooks. I've got like all my chapters figured out and I'm kind of writing it. But as I think about, oh, I got to put this in the handbook, I'm writing these little articles. I've just started this like a couple weeks ago, and I'm publishing those on a website. So if it's not there yet, it will be soon. But I'll link everything from horchhandbook.com. So if you're all interested in anything I'm doing, anything you've heard me talk about, you can go there. You can see my book on investing, the guidebook on running a business, and then the sustainability stuff. I'll get as much of that as I can. And I don't think I'm ready for too many more testers because I know my app is so bad. I'll tell you, the one thing I'm really worried about is I ask people to put all this information into the app, and I'm worried I'm going to lose all that information. And so I don't want to have a whole bunch of testers who spend all this time and then I lose it. So I want to get a little bit more solid in terms of, I'm sure the database and everything is working and I'm not messing things up so that people's time is well spent. But I'm hoping in the next month or so to be able to open that up and have more people testing it. And again, the way that app works, it's sort of like it asks you questions. You take this little survey of what you're doing, and then it will suggest things. Just what you're saying. Well, what should I do? If you take that survey, it'll say, well, I can see you're not doing this. Maybe you should do this. And there are already a lot of things like that out there on the web. So
mhm.
if you don't want to wait for my app, you can take somebody else's. It just what I'm trying to do is really connect it to very like not just you should compost, but specifically this is what you should do. Like you should
Right.
that, like, for example, if I were to recommend composting, I'd be like, okay, well, where is your compost going to go? Like, is it going to go into a bucket? Are you going to like get a service like garbage to
Garbage to
garden?
garden.
You can do that. It costs this much money per month, but that's certainly a way to do it. There's a free service in Brunswick. You can actually take your compost. They've got places in town you can take it for free. So if you don't mind, driving over or walking over or biking over and dumping your bucket in there, you can do that. Or if you want to actually make your own compost at home. So anyway, my app is will say, okay, compost, and then it will really specifically say, okay, here's how you could compost. And I'm starting in Brunswick, so it'll have all of the information that's relevant to Brunswick residents first. But then my ambition is to sort of open this up, sort of like open source, and say, okay, if you live in X town and you know how to compost in your town, please put that information in the app so that everyone in your town can know the specifics for your town. Because not every town has what Brunswick has, right? So, and of course, I won't know that, but the ambition here is to create an app so everybody can sort of share their knowledge. And if you go to that app, you'll find out either somebody from your town's already found the answer, or you can find the answer and then add it, and then the next person will have the benefit of what you've done. And that could be another way to feel good about yourself. Like you pay it forward, maybe sustainability. Like you do something that's sustainable, you have a way to share it and help other people be sustainable as well.
Cool. I like that a lot. That's a great way to think about it too. I mean, to help your community. I mean,
Yeah.
I keep saying this, but like I have a little sticky note behind my desk, behind my computer that says community sufficiency. And I think you were saying earlier, what if I were to ask you where you came up with the idea for the podcast? But so I wanted to do like a homesteading podcast, but I was so discouraged by a lot of like exclusivity among homesteaders. Like if you don't have, if you have a cell phone, like you're not really a homesteader, blah blah blah. And I totally would not fit into that category.
Right.
But
you're not Amish.
Yeah, but I also, and a lot of people say, you don't need to. It's all about self-sufficiency, like you be able to take care of yourself. And I don't want to do that. Like so community sufficiency, like you help your community and they'll help you. Like it's
right.
So ultimately what I'm doing is building myself a team. My community that's gonna, we're gonna take care of each other.
Right.
So
well, that's awesome. Yeah, I admire what you're doing. And it's right along. I call that the community pathway. Like I think absolutely what you're doing is very sustainable. And then, humans are social creatures. We don't exist. I mean, we're not tigers. We don't go out into the world and like have a territory and attack, another human that comes close to us. We like to be with other humans, right? I do. But to your point about exclusivity, that is something that I really dislike. And so that's, I guess, another reason why I'm running this app and Handbook is like, it should be about you and your own values. Like, if you want to have a cell phone, great. Here's how to have a cell phone that doesn't have a lot of toxic materials in it. Here's how to recycle that cell phone when you're done with it. That kind of thing. So I'm all about sort of enabling people to enjoy their lives in a way that allow other people to enjoy their lives too. Right. I'm not here about like, oh, if you do that, you're not sustainable. Like, well, how can you be sustainable? That's really what I'm trying to like. Okay, like for example, I like to travel. There is no way to travel across the ocean in a reasonable amount of time without burning jet fuel. There just isn't.
Right.
It's a bummer, but I'm not going to tell people, hey, if you fly in a jet, you're unsustainable. I don't beat myself up about it. On the other hand, if I'm going to the grocery store, I don't drive a pickup truck, right? I walk or I bicycle.
Right.
And I try not to even drive an electric car because you know what? I live 2 blocks from the store.
It's not that far, right?
And so I feel like, okay, every day I'm bicycling, or every week I'm bicycling to go grocery shopping. I'm doing all of the things in my life that I can do. And then I go fly on a jet when I want to go to Japan, because I really want to go see Japan before I die. Like, I'm not gonna, I'm not going to deny myself that, and I don't want to deny that to anyone else. I just want to help people. If you want to have a nice yard, maybe you do need to have some chemical fertilizers. Okay, but do you have to throw your garbage in the can you compost? You could do both. Like you could, so at least you could do something, right?
Right.
I mean, there's nobody that I've met that really wants to destroy the entire planet and be unsustainable, right? So there's always something that at least every person so far that I've come
Right.
across, there's always something that we can agree on. Like, hey, wouldn't it be good if you did this, right? And sometimes it's just like having a long enough conversation to get to the thing. And again, that's why I have these 7 pathways, because there's lots of different, like maybe you don't do anything but community. Maybe community is your thing. Great. Like you could be a great shining example. Your podcast, really sustainable idea. It helps share information, it helps get people moving in that direction. That's like big points for sustainability. You have a very high sustainability score because of that podcast, right? That's a great thing. So I'm all in favor of what you're doing and that attitude of like, hey, let's not be about judging people or exclusivity, but more about sharing information and and also I guess the idea of being humble enough to ask other people for their opinion, because sometimes that's hard for people to do, right? You're the expert, you have a pedigree or got a degree or whatever, and you want to like, I don't know, I think it's great when people are interested in what other people think about it and open to that sort of idea of bringing in new information and then hopefully changing your opinion if you learn something new, and then changing behavior. Obviously, if you learn something, that's the end goal. Is like, okay, you can hear me talk about this stuff, but are you actually still eating beef all the time? Are you actually still throwing your stuff in the garbage? Like that's, I guess the other thing is with this handbook is like, okay, you've read this stuff. Now, what are you actually doing? Let's take another, like take the survey, do a bunch of stuff, and then take the survey again and see what's changed and measure the difference. And if it's the same, it's like, okay, do you really care about sustainability? Or and maybe you don't, but if you do care about sustainability, what do we need to change to actually improve your score?
Okay. I like that. I mean, yeah, people are going to do what they're going to do, but I'm hoping that these messages that I'm sharing every week are, will touch somebody and have them say, "Oh, I could totally do that." Like,
right. Yeah.
I could get a little compost bin and I could,
right.
or something like, or I could change my light bulbs.
Yeah. Well, and I think even just a lot of people don't, I mean, there's so much going on. Like you don't even like, I'm sure a lot of people in Brunswick don't know that for free, you can take your compost and dump it and they'll deal with it for you. Right. I don't think that word has gotten out to every single person in town.
Right.
And so that might be something, somebody hears that and like, oh, and then that's fantastic because one less bag of garbage going into the waste stream.
Right. Well, honestly, I keep reading on the Nextdoor app that the places where the compost goes are overflowing.
Well, that's another great thing. I didn't know that. So, hey, who do we talk to at the town? I mean, I volunteer at the Rotary Club, and I was just talking to the Parks and Rec guys, and one of them actually used to work for Garbage to Garden.
Oh.
How does Garbage to Garden? Anyway, so he's big into compost. He works for Parks and Rec, so maybe there's somebody in the town we could say, hey, let's make sure that we are taking care of. We're going to provide the service. Let's do it well, right?
Yeah.
And figure out how to make sure that those aren't overflowing.
But that's amazing, though. It's a great. I mean, it's a bummer that it's overflowing, but it's also really cool that there are that many people utilizing it.
Right.
So it's encouraging.
Yeah.
If that many people weren't composting before, that now the bins are overflowing, that's cool.
Absolutely.
But it would be really cool if it is not overflowing and people are not discouraged.
That would be ideal, right? Yeah. Sometimes these are counterproductive ideas. Yeah. And that has happened. Like again, with composting, it's a little bit of a tricky thing because if you do it poorly, I think you've mentioned worm bins. That can be a nightmare. If you don't do worm bins well, you can have flies in your house, which is way more than some people want to deal with. Other people don't mind it, but there are some clients, some customers of mine who are like, they would come back freaked out, like, oh my gosh, I've got flies in my house because of the stupid worm bin. What do I do? And we sort of have to talk them off the cliff and say, okay, is worm bins really, is this, because there's always that, it's a biological system.
Right.
And with biology, you never know what's going to really happen. It could be all sorts of things.
Oh. I haven't
So,
had flies yet. I've had mine for over 5 years.
yeah, well, you're doing it well. Some people are not as fastidious about, covering it. And once you get like, and also once, insects really do, I mean, just like us, they want to survive and have kids. So once you have a colony of flies in your house, it's hard to eradicate every single one. So,
I that's for sure.
yeah.
So
I hope I didn't jinx you. I hope your worm bin is going to
oh my
continue to go
gosh,
well.
that would be awful.
Yeah. I can just see that maybe I've like planted some doubts in your mind. Sorry if I did.
we have the spring ants right now, and I'm like,
oh, okay.
I'm like angry all the time because they're in my sink, and I just,
oh yeah,
I'm like, oh my gosh, it just makes me feel like my house isn't clean, and it just makes me
Yeah.
want to clean more, and I hate that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
not flies, not yet anyway. But so Fred,
Maybe
this
not
has
ever.
been right.
Yeah. Yeah.
This has been so helpful. I'm really thrilled to connect with you and to share this information. When I say the word sustainability, like, what does that mean? What does that mean to you specifically, like personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think especially after my experience with the Green Store, I really gravitate to the idea of environmental sustainability. That's kind of where my mind gravitates to. But I know that other people have different views of it. But I'm always thinking about there's a famous United Nations definition, which is to satisfy your needs in a way that other generations can satisfy theirs.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's thinking about not using things up and not polluting, and then so that they very smart people, smarter than me, came up with that definition. But there's other ways to think about it. There's sort of the social justice angle to sustainability that a lot of people, especially now, are really bringing into it. But when I think about it, I'm always going to sort of I'm very human centered, I guess, would be one thing. I think about what do people need. So we need clean air, we need clean water, we need food, we need companionship, all the things that make life on Earth really fun for humans. I'm thinking about how can Earth sustain people? So that's really kind of how I come to it. But that UN definition is pretty good because you're thinking, okay, like I bought this house and there was a bunch of lead paint in it. It's like, oh, that's a bummer. Like they put all this like toxic material that can poison my kids, and lead's no joke. You have lead poisoning as a kid, and you're permanently harmed. So like, let me not do that. Let me think about the chemicals I'm bringing into this house, so that future generations don't have to remediate a problem that I've introduced.
Right.
Yeah, and so I think there's like again, there's environmental, there's the human aspect, and then there's the time aspect to it. It's like what's happening in the future. You're thinking about not just what immediately is happening, but down the road. And I guess the final dimension for me is sort of like, what if everybody did this? Like if I'm doing this and I'm one person, there's now 8 billion of us on the planet.
Right.
What if 8 billion people did this? Like, would I like that? Like, would I like 8 billion people to be doing what I'm doing? 8 billion people composting, that sounds pretty good. I'd love it. 8 people throwing garbage in the river, not so much. So I think about sort of scalability. Like if you can imagine 8 billion people doing something, it's probably sustainable. If you think, wow, if 8 billion people did this, how is that going to work? It's probably not sustainable.
Yeah. Wow. That's a really interesting way to look at that. But what a great example you've been for the 10,000, 20,000 in Brunswick. And then, the outer areas. But I think of all the things that I've heard about you from you and reading and everything, and just you've been such a great example. And I love that you started out in law and politics, and then you're like, I've done that. Like, I want to go save the world now. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Well, I was never in politics. I was exposed to that world. I went to law school, And I met a lot of people who, like, actually a college classmate of mine now is now governor of Hawaii. So it's like just really interesting. Like, you know these people, and they do pursue that, but it's like just the people I met that wanted to be politicians when they were in their 20s are like, oh my gosh, that is not that is such there's this word hubris, right? Like when I was in my 20s, I just knew how little I knew. I did not want to be the person that made all the rules. Now I kind of like,
Right.
I could imagine myself making some rules, but at this point, all the people in their 20s that want to make the rule, there it's like, so I have tried to run for office, but I would say what happened to me is like I went to law school. I thought politics is not for me. I came here, I opened my store, and then I met John Rensenbrink and Bob Dale and some really just people that were great friends. They've both of them have passed away, but they just convinced me that I ought to like try to change the system, because in my opinion, one of the big problems we have is that we have like we like to more people want to be sustainable, right? More people want to do the right thing, but it's actually our public policies make it hard to do the right thing. And I'm thinking about bicycling, like like I know a lot of people who are like, well, I don't bicycle because we don't have any bicycle lanes. And I'm like, yes, we don't have any bicycle lanes. We could have bicycle lanes and we should have bicycle lanes, but we don't have bicycle lanes. And people, I was helping people buy green electricity back in 2002. And why are we like, this was like, I guess, right about the time I had my store in 2006. That was when Angus King and a bunch of other folks decided we were going to build all this wind power. Wind power is going to be the answer. And then natural gas was going to be the answer. And it's like, why are we doing that? That is the most ridiculous thing. There are so many other ways to do this that would be better. So I got sort of drafted into running for office and trying to like sort of help people make more informed decisions. And so the idea was to like, we have a very adversarial system with two parties, right? Anytime one party wants to do something, naturally the other party says no. And so
Right.
Al Gore gets out there and bless his soul, he's like, climate change is a problem. We need to do something about climate change. And he's a Democrat, right? Was vice president. Everyone knows he's a Democrat. And up till then, the Republicans had been, not super antagonistic about most environmental issues. But Al Gore claims that for the Democrats, and the Republicans can't help themselves, and they're against protecting the environment. It's like, what? How? Like, this is crazy.
Wait a second.
And yeah, and most places in the world believe that formation of new political parties is one of the hallmarks of a functioning democracy. If you cannot create a new political party and have a hope of winning office, you probably don't have like a truly democratic system. We haven't had a new party since the 1800s. You cannot create a new party in the United States. And we had the best opportunity in the entire history, I guess, for the last 50 years of doing that in Maine with the Green Party. We had ballot access. We had very favorable opportunity to create a really viable multi-party democracy in Maine. But again, Angus King and other folks just stomped on that idea. I ran for office and Angus King endorsed my opponent after telling me that he wouldn't get involved in the race. And then just so many people that I thought kind of knew better. So anyway, I was turned off from politics. I went into politics, and now I'm doubly convinced that it's just very toxic and it's a problem. I just don't have a solution for it, unfortunately. There's clear. I know what we need to do. I just don't know how we can get there. Which is, we need to have a multi-party democracy. We need to give people the opportunity to identify with a party that really represents what they believe, and not have to pick sides. I mean, right now you have to be this
Democrat
way or that way.
Republican.
You cannot create a party that really represents a solution. You just have to decide which camp you want to go into. And so anyway, so I'm done with politics. I really tried. It's just it was.
But you're also on communities, on committees, like you're in the Rotary.
Yeah,
and
I am. I try to stay away from anything that anything that there's like again, if it becomes politicized, and I think even town government committees can get that way. So I try to be non-governmental, is what I would say. I try to work
Okay.
out, like, because there's a big thing right now, the climate, like Janet Mills is doing a whole bunch of good work, well-intentioned, but I think ultimately counterproductive because it's so associated with the Democrats. It's like if it's so I have almost an allergy to that. I really want to work where everybody feels welcome. Sort of that exclusion idea you were
Mm-hmm.
talking about. I
Right.
just feel like it's just so hard to for people to trust you and to trust that you don't have a political agenda if you
Right.
kind of get involved with something that is leaning one way or the other. So I really try to be apolitical, and Rotary so far has been okay that way. It's like we definitely are not political, and so anyway, yeah, I do all sorts of committees. I try to do all sorts of nonprofit work, but I try to stay out of politics. And the only way I would get into politics would be to help a third party emerge that I feel like could actually make the whole system work better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's all that helpful to promote one side or the other. As much as it seems like it would be a good idea to like help the Democrats win on climate, I feel like all that does is then make the
It just
Republicans
makes the
even worse
Republicans
on.
mad.
And it's like, yeah, it's like, why would, this is unfortunate. This is the
Right. There's
dynamic.
no
Um,
progress.
yeah, so it's just it's a little bit frustrating.
Yeah.
And it's doubly frustrating because again, John Rensenbrink was a professor at Bowdoin College, has written extensively. We had really good conversations, and he did convince me that there is a possibility here to change the system. Unfortunately, it's just it is possible, I think, but it's just people much more skilled than me are going to have to make this happen. At some point, anyway, this is a big tangent, but if we could get to, I guess let's tie this back to sustainability. I think we have an unsustainable political system. I don't think the political system as it's going, I think it's getting worse and
100%.
worse. It's not getting better. I think the people who are doing it should know better. I think some of them do know better, and they're just, I mean,
They're just stuck.
I guess that's the other thing is I went to law school, and there are psychopathic people who are sociopathic, who are just, evil, I guess is maybe too strong a word, but they just don't care about the truth. They don't care about, I mean,
Yeah.
smart people. It is very scary. It's very scary to be around somebody like that and to realize that's who is naturally gravitating to the parties who get political power, who wield political power, people who really don't care about the common good, really don't care about all the things I care about. And they're smarter than me, and they're stronger than me in the sense that they have more connections.
More, yeah.
It's a little bit terrifying, to be honest, to be at a top 10 law school, to be, I got to meet with the Supreme Court justices and talk to people who are clerking on that, get to meet people on the law review journals. And yeah, I was actually a little bit terrified. And and here we are, like, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia is sort of an example of that level of thinking, where people are willing to make these decisions. Like, you just think, who would invade a country like that? Who would send thousands and maybe even millions of people to their death? And it's the kind of people that really like politics. It's crazy. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's a big segue. But
Woo!
I like life affirming things. I like people who are doing what you're doing, thinking about how can I be a better person? How can I work with my neighbors? How can we make our community stronger? That's really, where I like to go.
Yeah, same. And so I definitely want to let you get back to your evening. But so what is the best way to
You're gonna have
find
to cut a lot of
you?
this out. You're gonna have to edit this way down. I don't know how long your podcasts are. Yeah, what's the best way to find me? So, my name is pretty easy to Google. You can always Google it. I think horchhandbook.com is probably going to be the website that I'll keep going. So if people want to like find out my sustainability stuff, that's a good way to find it. Yeah, and hopefully, if you're in town in Brunswick, I'm going to try to, again, once I publish the handbook, I'm going to try to have some events and things like that. So hopefully people will see me around. A lot of people say, where have you been? I haven't seen you in like 10 years. I'm like, yeah, I have been working on Spark. I've been doing other things, but I'm hoping to become more visible in the community to do more events. I certainly do a lot of stuff with the Rotary and that sort of thing. But yeah, so let's I would love to do this also. You mentioned maybe we could do this on a regular basis. That would be fun. We could maybe think about sort of a regular basis, and that could be a way people could hear, like tune into your podcast. That would be a great thing. So let people know, tune into the podcast. You have interesting guests every time, but every so often I'll pop back on and give you an update. How the handbook's coming, what the latest thing is. We can bring some people along. You tell me what kind of things you want to talk about, and I'll rustle up some other folks. We could have a panel. It'd be a lot of fun.
Or we could just dig deeper into subjects like, gardening or composting or, something like that. We could totally do that. I'm down. Sweet.
Yeah. Well, great. I'd love to, I have questions for you. So next time we talk, you can tell me a little bit about what you're doing. Because again, for me, it's really interested to hear what people know, what they're thinking, how they approach these different things. And
same.
And I'm sure you're ahead of me on some. You probably know more about some sustainability topics than I do. Like you probably have done something. That. Well, there's something, but I'm sure I could learn from you. I'm just saying that. Like I'd love to dig into that and figure out what I could learn. I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking and not a lot of listening. So next time I hope to we can have more of a balanced conversation. I'd love to find out kind of where you are, and maybe if we can get to it, if I can get it done, I'd love to sort of have you maybe take a crack at a sustainability score, and we could sort of talk through what you learned from that,
absolutely,
whether it was useful, and we can maybe use that as sort of like a framework. Like you could take my little survey and you could tell me, hey, this survey was helpful, inspiring, or that was depressing, or whatever it was, whatever reaction you had to doing. I know some people I know some people do it and they're like, they want to get a perfect score. It's like, well, I don't think you can get a perfect score of sustainability, right? I mean, there's always something you could do a little bit better.
Yeah.
There's always something that you're like, oh, that didn't quite work. But I don't think you should beat yourself up about it, right? Just do what you can, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, every day is a new day and it's a new chance to start, and absolutely. I mean, like you were saying about flying, traveling, like you can't help the fossil fuels, but you can do everything that you can when you're not on a plane.
Right.
It's we just need to try to balance it out, or at least just be mindful of what we're doing, not be just totally careless.
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
For sure.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks again for the opportunity. Sorry we went so long, but hopefully next time we can be more focused, maybe.
There's just so much. There's so much to you. There's just a lot of depth, and it's cool. It's cool. Great. I mean, this is a great place to start, I think.
Great. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, good luck. I don't know how long your podcast episodes are, if you need to edit it. So sorry about, if there's too much length here, but
I love it.
And let me know when you want to do this again. I'm happy to do it.
Sounds good.
Really appreciate it. Great.
Thank you so much, Fred.
All right. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.